translate ancient writings from Sumer, from way long ago, from after 11,000 years ago even. And this will absolutely change everything once we realize that these two great scientists, Zecharia Sitchin and Michael Tellinger, have put together the mysteries of how we got to be how we are and why we keep fighting each other and why we have diseases and stuff like that. And with this knowledge, we are going to be able to take care of things in a way better way than ever before. And so what this whole branch of study is called revisionist anthropology, where we look at the so-called myths of ancient civilizations, and instead of saying, well, yeah, these guys were smart, they built great big buildings and had all this, it could make bricks and do all kinds of great things like that, but they just made up these stories about gods who told them how to do everything. They have primitive minds when it comes to gods. Well, what we can now tell you beyond the shadow of a doubt that these so-called gods were just big, tall people. I mean, 12 to 15-foot people, and they're depicted on statues and drawings and everything. It's just exactly that, who have laser weapons, who have rocket ships, who have helicopters, and who controlled the planet through a hybrid race of slaves, that's us, that they manufactured. What I would like to do right now is to just look at the main things that they said, sort of an overview of what they gave us and how they conditioned us to be in what's essentially the same matrix that they created right now, one of hierarchy, of competition, of war, that kind of thing, that degradation and derogation of women and minorities, and a very small ruling elite, and the whole thing which we got from them. And so we will go back to what they had on their planet before they got here, and what they created here, and what we could do to get out of it. Would you like to say anything to sort of kick off the thing, Janet?
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to listen to our first broadcast of ENKI Speaks. Our website is enkispeaks.com, www.enki, which is spelled ENKI, and speaks, SPEAKS.com. And we're going to explore the writings of the ancient astronauts and what they left behind here on the Earth, the anomalies all over the planet, and their current interactions with humanity, and the messages they left us. And so we're starting by exploring, what is the first book we're starting with? Go ahead.
Basically, the book that brings a lot of this together is called The Lost Book of ENKI, where the Atrahatyas and the Enuma Elish are all brought together in a cogent whole, basically from the writings that were dictated by one of the chief scientists of the gold mining expedition to Earth, whose name was ENKI. But I would like to just sort of give an overview of what we'll be getting into slowly and in detail. I was attracted to all this stuff because there were so many unaccountable things in our history. Suddenly there was these jumps in civilization, and there's movement of gigantic stones that we can't even move today, all kinds of amazing stuff that no one in the 1900s kind of anthropologists could make any sense of, but now we can make lots of sense of all this stuff. Okay, so we have this history that these people of ancient Sumer wrote on clay tablets, and we can now read what they wrote. And they said, here's what the gods dictated, and the story in a nutshell, we're going to look at this in great detail because it's very, very important to us, is that their planet, which was revolving around a dark star dwarf named Nemesis, intersected our inner solar system, and they were coming here to get gold because they were losing their atmosphere, and it was determined that there was gold here, and we're going to really go into how all that came about. And they wanted to bring the gold back and refine it down to the white powder of monoatomic gold, and let that float all over their atmosphere and hold the atmosphere in. That's why they came here. And so the astronauts were digging in the African gold mines, and they revolted. And their chief scientist said, "Look, I'll graft some of our genes onto these local humans here, humans called Homo erectus, and we'll make these short-term slaves that'll be happy to work for us, and they can do the mining." And then as the mining operations grew and the expedition leaders settled down to have fiefs of their own, basically they used them for farming, and then they started warring against each other and used them as military. And when the humans started to realize there's only a few thousand of these, and there's millions of these hybrids, that's us, they started becoming alarmed.
And when the Anunnaki started.
Yeah. And so what happened was they realized that in one of the passes of their planet, as it was going to come between Mars and Jupiter, it was going to make the ice on the Antarctic slide into the South Sea and cause a great big deluge and just really totally mess up the Earth. And so the commander said to all of the Nibirans, "Don't tell the hybrids," that's us. They're an illegal race anyway. We're not supposed to create slave races according to the laws of planetary colonization. So just let them all drown, and I forbid anyone to tell them. Well, the chief scientist, one of the guys that made the hybrids, instead of telling them, he took the plans, the computer plans, and put it in Noah's wall. Noah's real name was Sutra in the Sumerian stuff, how to make a submersible, and this guy, ENKI, left his son, Nergal, to drive the submersible to the top of Mount Ararat in Turkey. And the Nibirans decided they would now rule through the descendants of Noah, and it's the descendants of those descendants that to this very day rule us and follow the same pattern of divide and conquer, and that's in a nutshell and what they did. And their competition got so heavy that at one point the commander actually nuked his nephew's forces, but the fallout from the nuking of Sinai and the cities on the south end of the Dead Sea, the fallout from that blew all over Sumer and killed everybody there. The only people to escape were the people that were far north in Babylon. And so the head of Nibiru in Babylon, a guy named Marduk or Ra, took over for a while. And so it is. Most of these guys from Nibiru left from their last base up in Nazca on top of the Andes, up past Lake Titicaca, and went back around 2025 BC. And but some of them stayed around, particularly the commander Enlil, or Yahweh, and he was. We will go into great detail of just what he did in the affairs of humans and that sort of thing. So, what would you like to say as by way of introduction, darling?
Well, I thought we could begin by reading from the Lost Book of Enki, which is a lovely book written by Zecharia Sitchin. Zecharia Sitchin was a scholar, and he translated ancient Sumerian and other ancient texts, which predate the biblical texts and are the foundations of our modern religions. We'll go into that in greater depth at a later period. But Zechariah Chichen left us October, I think it was 9th or 10th of the year 2010. And so he left us a legacy of about 10 or 12 books based on all this research that he did starting in 1976 with the 12th planet. So we're going to begin by reading from
yes, I'll start
the first tablet of the Lost Book of ENKI.
Okay. In prior times, none of the gods was on earth, nor were the earthlings, that's us, yet fashioned. The abode of the gods was on their own planet, Nibiru, a great planet, reddish in brilliance, around the sun, an elongated circuit Nibiru makes. For a time in the cold is Nibiru engulfed, for part of its circuits by the sun strongly is it heated, and a thick atmosphere Nibiru envelops by volcanic eruptions fed. All manner of life this atmosphere sustains. In the cold period, the inner heat of Nibiru, it keeps about the planet like a warm coat that is constantly renewed. In the hot period, it shields Nibiru from the sun's scorching rays. It holds and releases to lakes and streams, giving rise. Our own species sprouted by our own essence and eternal seed to procreate, and our numbers grew. To many regions of Nibiru our ancestors spread. Some tilled the land, some four-legged creatures shepherded. Rivalries occurred, encroachments happened, clashes occurred. Sticks became weapons, and clans gathered into tribes. Then two great nations faced each other, north against south. Missiles, weapons of thunder and brilliance, there was death and destruction, both north and south. For many circuits, desolation reigned the land. All life was diminished. Peacemaking was declared. Emissaries said to one another, let there be one throne on Nibiru, one king to reign over all. Leader from the north or from the south by lot be chosen. If he be from north, let south choose a female to his spouse as equal queen to reign alongside. If by lot a south male be chosen, let the north's female be his spouse. Let their firstborn son be the successor in a unified dynasty, thus be formed on Nibiru forever to establish.
Okay, let's go over that, what we just said,
okay,
and further explain, because that's a lot of information. And it was written in what's it called, dynamic pentameter. It's a style that is very poetic in nature. So we're talking about life back on Nibiru, which is the planet where the Anunnaki come from. And Nibiru, could you explain, Dr. Wesson, about the elongated orbit of
Yes,
Nibiru?
okay. So Nibiru does not rotate around our sun. It never goes around our sun. It goes around a dark star that we can't see because it's dark but has its own amount of light. It's about 49 astronomical units from here. It's called Nemesis. And Nibiru comes through our inner solar system every 3,600 years. And so that's when these guys from this planet that's going around Nemesis can most easily come here. And so they had trouble with this. What we're saying here is that ordinarily Nibiru is protected by its atmosphere, and now and they've got a unified planet. They fought a nuclear war where everybody was dying. There was way more women left than men, and they said, we've had enough. We'll just have a king. And what they established was a military dictatorship. Now, something we're going to read on, something is about to happen. Janet's going to read to you for a bit.
Well, I wanted to go over this a little bit more before we go to the next phase.
Good.
So what he was saying in this book is that life began on Nibiru, and just like on Earth, they developed an atmosphere which shielded Nibiru from the sun's scorching rays, and Nibiru is part of a twin star solar system of Solaris, which is Earth's sun, and Nemesis, which is the son of Nibiru. So these two suns rotate around each other, and they have planets and moons around each sun. So then they, just like humanity, they started to grow in numbers, and they went to all regions of Nibiru, of the planet, and some became farmers who tilled the land, and some of them became shepherds of four-legged creatures, and some lived in the mountains and the valleys. But then rivalries occurred, and they got territorial, so encroachments happened, and they clashed, and eventually sticks turned into weapons, and tribes began, and two great nations, the North and the South, faced each other. So they're talking about their entire history, which probably spans thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of years. We don't know exactly. These are translations of ancient texts, cuneiforms, and so we're deciphering this as we go along. But eventually they developed, like humanity, missiles, and weapons of thunder and brilliance increased the terror. And so a long war, fierce, engulfed the planet, and brother amassed and fought against brother. And there was death and destruction, both north and south. And so for this happened for many circuits, meaning rotations around the planet, and so until desolation reigned the land, that all life was diminished. So we see that the Nibirans were bombing themselves to extinction, so we can learn from this. Then they declared a truce, and they started negotiations, peacemaking, and they declared, let the nations be united, the emissaries said to one another. And they decided to have one throne on Nibiru. So they had a kingship, and they were definitely crowning a king. But this is very critical. They had a leader from the north and the south, king, and the female from the opposing area will be an equal queen to reign alone. That's very critical. So in this time in Nibiru, men and women were equal, and the king and queen were seen to be equal in power. So they chose by lot, and if by lot a south male was chosen, then they chose a north male, a female, to be his spouse. So what they did was they started to have political alliances, much like we see in our political structure, especially in antiquity, where a king would marry a queen from another land, and that would create an alliance, and then their children would be okay, go ahead, do this.
Okay. So what happened next is Nibiru started losing its atmosphere. They were getting radiated. They were in danger of dying from no atmosphere, and so the council said, look, why don't we try bombing the volcanoes? Maybe we can make a dust cloud that'll cover the whole planet and keep our atmosphere in. And so they took their nukes that they'd been using for wars, and they dropped them down the volcanoes and made a lot of dust, but it still didn't really solve the problem. The other thing was they knew that they could make white powder of monoatomic gold, which would float up and could really provide a good shield. And their instruments had shown that the asteroid belt and Earth had a lot of gold, and their astronomers had said that Earth itself was formed when a moon of Nibiru, and then Nibiru itself had struck what's now the Pacific Basin and exposed all the gold. Yes, Janet wants to talk.
Well, I'm sorry for the interruption. I had to take care of an incoming call. So, sorry, we're new to this. We have to somehow block incoming calls. But the critical thing after this union of the North and the South is they said, let their firstborn son be the successor. So they still have kind of a patriarchy thing where the son is the successor. And so this starts a system that is going to this day about men being somewhat more valuable than women. The firstborn son, and also this thing about the firstborn, and this is, pay attention, this comes into play. It comes into play later. So, let a unified dynasty thus be formed, unity on Nibiru forever to be established. Now, we'll go back to reading some more, and then we'll do a discussion.
Well, let me just say that what they established was a military dictatorship. There were two royal princes, commanders of the weapons that protected the palace with these divine weapons called the Royal Hunter and the Royal Smiter. And the palace was flanked by these uniformed astronauts, and they had the winged emblem of Nibiru on their uniforms. And the king sat on the throne room. And his foremost son, which is a son by his half-sister, even though it wasn't the necessarily the firstborn son, sat on his other side. Okay, so what's happening now is these people are getting desperate about what to do about this change in the weather. And so if you would start reading here, Janet, this is the part I want you to do next. Start there.
Okay, from circuit to circuit, nearing the sun, heat grew stronger. In the faraway abode, coolness was more biting. In Agade, the throne city, the king, those of great understanding assembled.
And then go to here.
Volcanoes, the atmosphere's forebearers, less belching, were spitting up. Nibiru's air has thinner been made. The protective shield has been diminished. From circuit to circuit, Nibiru's atmosphere, more breaching, suffered. With missiles, the volcanoes to attack, their dormancy to bestir, their belching to increase, the atmosphere to replenish, the breach to make disappear. For decision, Lama was too feeble. What choice to make, he knew not.
Okay, so now we come to this, an upstart prince named Alalu pushed Lamu off of a tower and said, I'm doing something about it. I'm not going to let us all die here. I'm king now. Well, up stepped the guy that would have been king next after Lamu, someone named Anu, and said, hey, I'm supposed to be king. And Alalu said, now wait, I'll make a deal with you. Have your son, ENKI, he was a great scientist. He said to this Prince Anu, who said he's the real successor to be the next king. He said, your son ENKI, Anu, can marry my daughter Damkina, and their kid will then be the next king after me. Would you agree to that? That's way better than us having a war and having to fight in another civil war. And Anu said, okay, I'll go for it. And so ENKI did, and they made ENKI break his engagement to whoever he was engaged with, some very important person named Nimma, but we'll come back to that. So ENKI married Damkina, and they had a son named Marduk, who was for a while regarded as the heir apparent to Alalu. But then Anu revolted. Anu said, you're not doing it. Things aren't getting better. The probes you sent out toward Earth got hit by asteroids. We lost 500 astronauts. Alalu, I'm challenging you. And so when he challenged him, is wrestling. He said, let's wrestle. He said, two great big, 12-foot guys. Let's wrestle, and whoever wins will be the be king, and that's a hell of a lot better than having another war. So they fought, and Anu won. And then he was afraid he was going to get executed. So Alalu ran to where the rockets with the missiles were, and he grabbed one and he blasted to Earth. And when he got to the asteroid belt, instead of trying to dodge the shifting around asteroids, he used some nukes and blasted them out of the way, and he landed at Basara at the head of the Persian Gulf and waded ashore and found there was decent air there. He took off his helmet. He was just totally happy. He aimed his missiles at Nibiru, and he took samples from the Persian Gulf, and he said, "There's gold here. I can save the planet, and if you don't capitulate and make me king of Nibiru and Earth as well, I'm going to blast Nibiru with my nukes." And so Anu back on got the message and said to his son Enki, "Look, he's your father-in-law. Can you? If I send you, maybe you can calm him down and get so the missiles aren't pointing at us." So Enki came to Earth. I'm going to give this to Janet a little bit now.
All right. So we see that they had developed a system of resolving conflict by wrestling, and this comes into play later. And it's very interesting to see a civilization that was once warring, blasting each other to nuclear holocaust, picking a champion to wrestle and solve issues. So that was quite essential. Can you give me the book, honey, that you put over there? I want to read some more of our ongoing. And you close the book. So if you open it to where we were, please. Sure. Thank you. Hold on one second. I'll probably get back on track.
The next thing is
I want to read a little bit of how it is actually without fast forwarding, because I want our listeners to get a feel for the poetry. Okay. And if we just do little bits and pieces here and there, they're missing the beautiful poetry.
Okay, start with this, where Anu steps forth and is contesting the kingship with Alalu, if you wish.
Okay.
The part that's underlined.
From among the princes, a young prince stepped forward. About the kingship words he wished to say. Succession must be reconsidered to the assembly, he said. Though neither firstborn nor by the queen a son of pure seed am I descended, the essence of On in me is preserved, by no concubine diluted.
On was the founder of the whole dynasty.
And this is Anu, his son. The counselors heard the words with amazement. The young prince to step closer they summoned. They asked for his name. It is Anu. After my forefather On am I named. They inquired about his generations. Of On's 3 sons he them reminded. Enki was the firstborn. Without son or daughter he died. Anib was the middle son. Instead of Enki, the throne he ascended. Anib, the daughter of his youngest brother, took to be wife. From them onward the succession is in the annals recorded. Who was that younger brother, a son of On and Antu, one of purest seed? The counselors with wonderment looked at each other. Nibiru was his name. Anu to them announced, he was my great ancestor. His spouse Nibiru was a half-sister. Her son was firstborn. Anama was his name. His wife was a half-sister. By laws of seed and succession, a son she bore him. Of pure descent the generations continued. By law and by seed, perfect.
So this is the important part, if you want.
So they were very concerned with genetics and who would be the rightful heir to the throne.
And you'll see that the racism that still abounds on this planet actually comes back to this idea of royalty, and that some people are better than others. And it was already built into these guys' society way before they created the hybrids that they are. Okay, so here's the counselors are looking at Anu's credentials, and they're saying, "Let Anu be king." Many counselors shouted, "Let Alalu be removed." To Prince Anu, Alalu his arm and embrace offered. To Anu he thus said, "Though by different offsprings, one ancestor, are we both descended. Let us live in peace together. Nibiru to abundance return. Let me keep the throne. Let you keep the succession." To the council words he directed, "Let Anu crown prince be. Let him be my successor. Let his son my daughter espouse. Let succession be united." Anu bowed before the council. To the assembly he thus declared, Alalu's cupbearer I shall be, his successor in waiting, a son of mine, a daughter of his, as bride shall choose. In this manner Alalu on the throne remained. Let the celestial boats be constructed, he decided. To seek gold in the hammered belt, he decided. Do you want to read on?
No, I thought we could discuss that a little bit before we go on,
Sure.
because this is very important.
Yeah.
So they're very concerned about their offspring, so they made an agreement that Anu would remain on the throne. Is that what?
No, Anu's going to...
That Alalu, oh, that's right, Alalu would remain on the throne, and Anu's son, who is ENKI, would marry Alalu's daughter, Damkina, and their son,
Marduk,
who was yet to be conceived, and is Marduk.
He
would become
heir apparent.
The heir apparent, the king of Nibiru,
right,
in due time. Now, what we know is that Anu is still alive, and Alalu is dead. We'll explain all this later. So I'm not sure how that works. Does Anu have to step aside from Marduk to rule Nibiru, or do they have to wait for his death? And his death could be billions of years, because the Anunnaki are very long-lived.
We'll see that Marduk and Anu have different ideas about this, and so does Inanna.
So the last thing on this page of the first tablet of the Lost Book of ENKI was they were talking about, let the celestial boats be constructed to seek gold in the hammered bracelet. So they are in Nibiru, which is way out beyond the orbit of where Earth is, and they have to come through the hammered belt, and that is our asteroid belt.
Yes.
That is between Mars and the Earth. So they're talking about the hammered bracelets, and the previous trip in, the boats were crushed, and none of them returned.
But I want you, if you want to read on, you should read this double part, or just let me do it.
All right, so we'll let you go read again.
Okay.
And then we'll
so for 9 counted periods, that's orbits of Nibiru around Nemesis, Alalu was king on Nibiru. In the 9th orbit, Anu gave battle to Alalu. They grappled with each other. We should read this whole thing because it's really powerful.
Yeah.
For 9 counted periods, Alalu was king on Nibiru. In the 9th Shar, Anu gave battle to Alalu. To hand-to-hand combat with bodies naked, Alalu he challenged. Let the winner be king, Anu said. They grappled with each other in the public square. Doorposts trembled and walls shook. Alalu bent his knee to the ground. He fell on his chest. Alalu in combat was defeated. By acclaim, Anu was hailed as king. Anu to the palace was escorted. Alalu to the palace did not return. From the crowds, Alalu stealthily escaped. Of dying like Lama, he was fearful. Unbeknownst to others, to the place of the celestial chariots, rockets, he hurriedly went. Into a missile-throwing chariot, Alalu climbed. Its hatch behind him he closed. And then it goes on. Unbeknownst to others, in the celestial boat, Alalu from Nibiru escaped. To snow-hued earth, Alalu set his course. By a secret, from the beginning, he chose his destination.
Yes, so anyway, this is how the Anunnaki first came to the earth. And there's some critical things that are about to unfold here. But you have to realize Alalu reigned for 9 shars, and shars are approximately 3,600 years.
Right, so you just mold 36.
Right. So approximately 36,000 years.
So the whole idea, in one rotation of Nibiru, and that's what a year is, how long it takes a planet to go around its star. So one rotation of Nibiru, 3,600 years, is how long it would take to have 180 generations of us humans who live less than a century born and die. 180. And so you can see these people were very, very long-lived even then. They lived millions of years, but since then they've had a whole year to work on it, and so they've gotten even better at it.
So Alalu was afraid that he would be killed. So apparently,
because he killed the other guy.
This battle for gaining the throne could have ended with him being assassinated or something.
But yeah, Lamu's kids and everybody said, This bastard murdered our dad. He pushed him off of off the tower. So there were these factions, and so we have this faction already beginning. You'll see there's the Alalu faction, and it gets even worse. But right now it's Anu versus Alalu, and Anu is sending his son, the scientist. He was called Ea then. But he became ENKI. Anyway, he was sending his son, listen, you go talk to your father-in-law and get him to take down those missiles so they ain't pointing at us, and let's see if we can work something out. You're the only one that because, you both sides will listen to you. And so now, so one of Alalu's kinsmen is the interplanetary pilot that's now driving the rocket ship that ENKI's on.
Let me read this here, because this is very important piece. Unbeknownst to others, to the place of the celestial chariots he hurriedly went. Into a missile-throwing chariot Alalu climbed. Its hatch behind him he closed. The four-part chamber he entered, and he went to the commander's seat he occupied. That which shows the way he lit up with bluish aura, the chamber firing. So that which shows the way probably is a screen, like a Google map. It's and the firestones he stirred up, their hum like music was enthralling. So they had some kind of fire system, probably. Yeah, there was something that was powering it. They're talking about their power system. And so unbeknownst to others in the celestial boat from Alalu from Nibiru escaped to snow-hued Earth. Alalu set his course. So they knew about Earth, and he set his course. He knew his course. He had his own Google solar system, and he fired his chariot. All right. So let's go to another part and read a little bit.
Well, before we read, let me just say that in ordinary English, just what's happening here. The pilot is a guy named Anzu, who is he's an astronomer, he's a pilot, and he's an ally of Alalu, and he's driving this thing. So he's acceptable to Alalu, who's got the missiles aimed at Nibiru. So when ENKI gets to near the asteroid belt, Anzu says, let's blast. We've got some nukes here. Let's blast these asteroids out of the way. And ENKI said, no way. It's against the laws of planetary colonization. He cites these laws to use nukes in space this way. Let's just use the water cannon and get these, and we'll just do that. And so they're using the water cannon, and Anzu is getting panicked. You're knocking on. Hey, we're heating up. We need the water. We can't keep diverting it to knocking these rocks out of our way. And so what they just when things are getting too hot, they land their rocket ship on Mars. There's a lake there. This is like 450,000 years ago. Understand? 450,000 years ago. Okay, so now they're landing. There's a lake there. They get water. They actually are able to take off their helmets a little bit. It's not as good as atmosphere as they like, but it works. There's an atmosphere and there's water, and they cool everything off, and then they proceed to Earth. I'm going to give this back to Janet now. I'll find a place for her to read.
Okay, so he's getting the book for me to continue, looking for the next part. And so we realize that they're arriving here on Earth, and there's going to be a lot of things unfolding that are totally relevant to humanity and how we got to get here. Because Earth at this time was evolving on its own. And there was life here, abundant life here. And we had Homo erectus and Neanderthalitis.
No, Neanderthal came later. Neanderthal was. We'll talk about that.
This is an anthropologist here. Tell us what was at that time.
Okay, there had been the survivors of a number of extinction events. Earth had been settled. Michael Cremo's work has showed these large skeletons of people who had pottery and baskets and technology, full-on human beings of various kinds. And there was lots of these human groups in different parts of the Earth. But the one that was we'll be dealing with a lot is one called Homo erectus, and we'll talk about Neanderthalensis a little bit later. But right now, we're jumping ahead. When they first landed on Earth, where they landed in the Persian Gulf, I mean, it was really nice and lush there. It wasn't all desert like it is now or anything like that. But in the Basara area, and they found they took samples, and there was gold flecks in the water, but it wasn't. They sent it back to Nibiru, and it didn't have all that much gold, and it was so much trouble to get. So ENKI traced this gold, and he found there was lots of it that was coming from Africa. But in the meantime, ENKI fired Anzu. He didn't trust Anzu anymore, and he went to where Alalu's rockets was, and he took the missiles out and he hid them. He flew them with his pilot, a guy named Abgal, down to Zimbabwe area and hid them in a cave. Okay, so he hid the missiles, and Anzu didn't know it was gone. And when Anzu found out that the missiles were taken out of Alalu's ship, he started flipping out, and ENKI fired him. You're fired, Anzu. And so, meanwhile, back in Nibiru, well, maybe I should just stop here. Janet probably wants to read some of this.
Yeah, I wanted to go back in time to their landing here.
Okay, do it.
You're going way down the line, and I want to slow this down, this process down. So I need a second to find where, it was very important their landing.
Yeah, I had it.
And
all set up. You turned the pages away from it.
We don't even have here yet. ENKI's not here yet.
I know, you turned away from it.
Okay, so.
Do you want me to show you again?
Yes. Could you please find it and slow down a little bit about where we're at? Let's do the time frame.
I know. Okay.
He's talking about Anzu, and
this is where you start. You just read the part that's underlined, and it'll flow.
Okay. Now, this is the account of how the olden times began, and of the era that in the annals, the golden era by name was known, and how from Nibiru to earth the missions went, the gold to obtain. The escape of Alalu from Nibiru was its beginning. With great understanding was Alalu endowed, much knowledge he by learning acquired. By his forefather Anshargal of the heavens and the circuits, much knowledge was amassed. By Enshar was knowledge greatly augmented. Of that Alalu made much learning with the With that, Alalu made much learning. With the sages he discoursed. Savants and commanders he consulted. Thus was knowledge at the beginning ascertained. Thus did Alalu this process of knowledge gain. The gold in the hammered bracelet was the confirmation. The gold in the hammered bracelet of gold in Tiamat's upper half was the indication.
That's the astronaut belt.
So what they had known that there was gold in the asteroid belt, and they were going to use gold to build a shield around their planet, which was losing its atmosphere, much like we have holes in our ozone. The planet Nibiru, after all these years of war and death and destruction, they had practically annihilated themselves, and they had destroyed their planet's ability to sustain its own atmosphere. Does this sound familiar? So what was critical for both them and for us, human beings, because we would not be here if not for the Anunnaki, was that they figured out how to save their home world. And in doing that, we will find out that's how we came to be. So they had a theory, which was known in antiquity, that there was gold in the hammered belt. And that's why Alalu was coming to the earth, because he thought that there was gold in the earth. And the reason being is that the hammered belt was the result of a collision that happened billions of years ago, and it was in the Pacific Basin. One of the passings of Nibiru, one of the moons of Nibiru, hit the Earth, and the Earth was known as Tiamat in those days, and pushed the asteroid belt out. Well, I don't know exactly how it landed up, but right now in time, the asteroid belt is part of the Earth. Okay, go ahead and fill that in, please.
Well, originally, Proto-Earth, or Tiamat, was located between Mars and Jupiter, and when first the moon of Nibiru, they call it the ill wind, and also Nibiru itself struck what's now the Pacific Basin, it knocked Tiamat, was half of it that was left, into orbit between Venus and Mars, where we are now, and it knocked the part that was where the Pacific hole was to become the belt of asteroids. Well, that's and the mantle, how thick the Earth is underneath the Pacific Basin, is only 12 miles deep, and it's all from sediment running off from the land and from volcanoes, whereas the rest of the Earth is like 65 miles deep. So the geological evidence certainly supports this view that the Nibiruans had of Earth. They knocked all the continents to the other side of the planet, and so they followed. ENKI and Alalu followed the track of where the gold flecks were going, because it wasn't enough, and they found huge deposits of gold. It's still the richest gold mines in the world in the south of Africa. And so ENKI started. He had his astronauts, about 200 of them, digging for this stuff. Anyway, here's Janet again.
All right. At the planet of gold, Alalu victoriously arrived, his chariot with a thunder crashing. With a beam, he scanned the place, his whereabouts to discover. His chariot on dry land descended. At the edge of extended marshes it landed. He put on an eagle's helmet. He put it on a fish's suit. The chariot's hatch he opened. At the open hatch he stopped to wonder. Dark-hued was the ground, blue-white were the skies. No sound there was no one to bid him welcome. Alone on an alien planet he stood, perchance from Nibiru, forever exiled. To the ground himself he lowered, on the dark-hued soil he stepped. There were hills in the distance, nearby much vegetation there was. Ahead of him there were marshes. Into the marsh he stepped, by the water's coolness he shuddered. Back to the dry ground he stepped, alone on an alien planet he stood. With thoughts he was possessed of spouse and offspring, with longing he remembered. Was he forever from Nibiru exiled? Of that again and again he wondered. To the chariot he soon returned, with food and drink to be sustained. Then deep sleep him overcame, a powerful slumber. How long he slept he could not remember. What awakened him he could not tell. A brightness there was outside, a brilliance on Nibiru unseen. A pole from the chariot he extended. With a tester it was equipped. It breathed the planet's air, compatibility it indicated. The chariot's hatch he opened, and at the open hatch he took a breath. Another breath he took, then another and another. The air of key indeed compatible was. Alalu clapped his hand, the song of joy he was singing. Without an eagle's helmet, without a fish's suit, to the ground himself he lowered. The brightness outside was blinding. The rays of the sun were overpowering. Into the chariot he returned, a mask for the eyes he donned. So I'm going to stop up there. So what he was discovering that, first of all, that he thought he was going to be alone and forever exiled from Nibiru. And at this point in the story, it was true. He never did get back to Nibiru. So it's very sad for him to contemplate.
Well, we'll see why he didn't get back.
We'll explore that. But this is, they didn't know that they could breathe the atmosphere. They had to test it. This is what we would have to do if we're going to another planet. And when he stepped into the water, it was so cold it even penetrated his suit. He had to go back inside.
Yeah, they had frogman outfits. We see statues of what we would clearly say this is a scuba gear.
Right. So he put on his scuba gear because he
his fish's suit, they call it.
Fish's suit, right. So it was very interesting to read this, and this is written of a time that's 450,000 years ago. So then it pursues, and he finds that the water were filled. You know, he had no food, no water, so the waters with fishes were filled. And the drinking water was not fit, so he's greatly disappointed. And so he looked at the hills, and he started to go that direction. And he went through the vegetation, and bushes to trees gave way. And then he found a place which was like an orchard. The trees with fruits were laden. And by this sweet smell, he was enticed. And Alalo picked a fruit in his mouth, he put it, and the smell was sweet, but sweeter the taste was. So this is how he discovered food here on Earth. So Earth, we already had fruit-bearing trees and orchards.
Yeah, the seeds, the waters of Nibiru and the seeds of Nibiru and that of Tiamat mixed during the collision so that the same DNA, the basic DNA, was the same on both planets. So, of course, the food and the life was compatible.
So he probably had landed originally in salt water, so he's looking for fresh water. So he keeps proceeding and eventually gets among the trees a wetness in his feet. He senses a sign of close by waters. So in the midst of the forest there was a pond, and he lowered the sampler into the water for drinking. He was looking for drinking water, and it was good. So Alalu laughed, an unstoppable laughter seized him. Imagine, he's all the way thousands of miles from home, never to see the good again, and he's alone. He's the original Robinson Crusoe, and his island is Earth, this island Earth. And so he laughs because, there's drinking water. He's going to live. He's not going to die that way. And the air was good. The water for drinking was fit, and there were fruit and fishes. What more could you ask for? He had landed in a paradise, Earth paradise. So what would you like to say?
I'll read a bit if you
Your turn.
Okay. So the air was good, the water for drinking was fit, there was fruit, there were fishes. But a slithering body by the poolside moved. His carried weapon he seized, a blast of its ray toward the hissing he directed, and the slithering body lay still. Dead was the creature, its long body was. Without hands or feet was the body. It was, of course, a snake. Okay, and so it goes on. He found the gold. Nibiru's fate, he wires back through the speaker of words. That's their communication device. He stirs it up. Nibiru's fate in my hands. On another world I am. The gold of salvation I have found. The fate of Nibiru is in my hands. To my conditions you must give heed. I think that's probably it for the day. We really covered a lot.
We have 5 minutes left, so let's just wrap this up and discuss what we covered so far. So this book goes on from 450,000 years ago, and it ends around 2150 BC. So we're going to be covering 2025 BC.
Well, I'm going to bring it way up, even beyond this book, to the days of Moses.
Yeah, we're going to be covering every week. We're going to cover a little bit of the book. We're going to go through, Moses and Jezebel, and we're going to take it up to the modern period with the ENKI Speaks information. And this is by Zechariah Sitchin, but it also combines the work. Tell the other teachers that you're studying and.
Okay, yeah. So Michael Tellinger has been excavating there's like these 500 kilometers of these big granite lanes down which the Anunnaki laid stones on the ley lines of the earth to generate electricity, which they captured in their pyramids all over the earth, but especially in South Africa. And they had basically solved the problems of moving very, very heavy things using white powder monoatomic gold, and the electricity, which they had a grid. And so we'll talk next time about how the slave race was created. That's us to work the mines and what that was all about. But from 300,000 BC to 200,000 BC, most of the humans were down in South Africa in this huge city of ENKI, and then there was another group of them in Sumeria. But what happened is ENKI and his cohorts kept breeding with the prettiest of these slaves, and pretty soon they had a line that they just thought was incredible. And we will talk about it next time, but that's probably the difference, Zecharia Sitchin thinks, between the Neanderthals and the up-leveling of the sons of Noah. And we'll talk about how Anunnaki, those who from